Eric Sundquist,
Here.
Chris McCahill,
Here.
Thomas Wilson,
Here.
Baltasar de Santana, Margaret Bergamini,
Present.
Badri Lankella,
Here.
that's it.
Thank you. And if our tech facilitator would...
Alder Foster's here.
Oh, yes.
And Robert Burke is here as well.
Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. And if our tech facilitator could proceed with our standard virtual meetings opener.
Sure. All right. Welcome to the virtual transportation planning and policy and planning board meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling on the number in your original email. Skip a bit here. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, assuming everyone's had a chance to read the minutes if they had wanted to. Our first item then is the approval of our minutes from October 19th, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Approve.
I see a motion from Badri. Second. Hold on here. Please use the hand raise feature so I can see that that's what you're doing. Anybody can do it, really. All right, Alder Foster, thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting, please unmute yourself and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I believe there are no registrants for public comment for items not on the agenda. Is that correct, Anne?
Correct.
All right. Are there any communications, disclosures, or recusals from members of the board? Please use the hand raise feature. All right. Seeing none, move on to our first item of business for the evening, Legistar 61929, amending sections 28.211, 28.061, 28.072, 28.082, and 28.091, and creating section 28.1418E of the Madison General Ordinances to create a new use, electric vehicle charging facility, and to require that certain future parking facilities are constructed to include a specified amount of electric vehicle capable and electric vehicle ready spaces.
So I think Stacy Reese is going to take this. She has a presentation that she's going to share with you. I am Matt Tucker, zoning administrator. I should introduce myself. Stacy.
Hi, yes, I'm Stacy Reese, the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of Madison. And this item was referred to the Sustainable Madison Committee on October 5th. So I have a brief presentation that I put together for those members that I can share with you tonight. Alrighty, so what we're talking about today here, I always like to share from our sustainability standpoint, the IPCC global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius will require the world to slash emissions by 45% from 2010 levels by the end of this decade. Just to kind of give a sense of where the city of Madison is at as far as greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see on the left-hand side, that light yellow portion of our pie is the greatest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere for our city, and that is the transportation and mobile sources category. And on the right-hand side, you can see that yellow slice of the pie broken down even further, where the largest contributor to the transportation and mobile services is vehicle miles traveled, specifically gasoline-powered vehicles, followed by diesel and light commercial truck. And from a public health standpoint, also sharing from the American Lung Association about tailpipe emissions, being the source of significant air pollutants, criteria pollutants, including particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds, which also have effects to upper respiratory syndromes such as asthma. And we always like to kind of point back to existing plans and goals that the city has. This is our 100% Renewable Madison report that was adopted last March, and that March of 2019. And in there, section 4.1.3 has goals around achieving our 100% renewable energy goals that include having developers and contractors build solar ready and EV ready, as well as looking at our electric vehicle zoning and permitting. In our City of Madison Comprehensive Plan, Imagine Madison, under the Green and Resilient chapter, Strategy 3 is to increase the use and accessibility of energy efficiency upgrades and renewable energy. Specifically, Action D is to support infrastructure to expand the use of electric vehicles and other eco-friendly fuel sources. Just to kind of give a couple examples of where the City of Madison has already invested in our own infrastructure around EV charging. So on the left-hand side is a new parking ramp facility over off Livingston. And that has 4 level 2 charging stations. And the cost for the stations were between $600 and $2,500, and the labor materials around $5,000. And then in an existing facility, the city county building, our engineering staff installed 10 chargers at the city county building. We have 16 total across all of our facilities. And the average cost was around $2,000 to $3,500 for those installations. So some other information I just wanted to share with the group is about the projections for EV electric vehicle adoption, showing the estimated sales in 2040 of 56 million EVs, which will be over 57% of the total new car market, overtaking ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles. And then looking a little bit at North American sales, as well as Midwest sales, and the adoption specifically here in Wisconsin, that Madison has current 1.9% of the EV market share, which is the highest in the Midwest. And there have been over 9,000 EVs sold in Wisconsin, with 4,700 registered in the state, with an increase that has happened from 2017 to 2018 of 24%. So some of the policy concerns around EV charging is sort of the chicken and egg, where folks that would like to purchase an electric vehicle want to see some of that electric vehicle charging infrastructure first before they go out and purchase or invest in an electric vehicle. And a recent article from Clean Wisconsin that just came out this last month, looking at specifically EV infrastructure in the state of Wisconsin and where we need to get to. This information was from Tesla and their experience in the market in California, specifically around the built environment, thinking how things that we build today are going to be up for the next 50 plus years. So this ordinance is actually trying to get in front of those 50 years and try to align the adoption curve for electric vehicles. And thinking a little bit about retrofitting parking structures is 4 to 8 times more expensive than outfitting garages at initial construction. And that, generally speaking, they're about 1% of total building construction cost. And we are amongst friends. There are several cities and states that have looked into EV charging ordinance and changes to either the ordinances or building codes in order to spur more EV charging infrastructure in their communities. And actually, Chicago passed theirs just earlier this year around Earth Day of 2020. And as we get into the draft ordinance, there's just some definitions that we can clarify as we get into it. There is what's called EV capable, where there's raceway for the installation of conduit and electric charging down the road. There's EV ready, where it does have the actual conduit in there, but not the charging station itself. And then EV installed, which actually has the charging station ready for a vehicle to be charged. So this is just the screenshot of Legistar. So the purpose of this amendment is to ensure and encourage present and future availability of electric vehicle charging stations. Again, just reiterating sort of the EV adoption sales that are increasing, and also specifically in the Madison region, the increase here. And so as electric vehicles see greater adoption in the market, to meet that projected increased future demand for charging infrastructure, it would be necessary to retrofit older parking facilities. So this ordinance ensures that not only will current and near-term charging station demand be met, but that future charging station demand can be cost-effectively provided, as it's far cheaper and more efficient to build EV-capable spaces at the time of new construction than to retrofit in the future. So this ordinance actually has two pieces in it. The first piece is it's creating a new use in the zoning code for an electric vehicle charging facility. So it'd be a standalone facility existing for the purpose of providing electric vehicle charging on a retail basis, like a gas station. And then this ordinance also creates a requirement that certain commercial and residential parking facilities of a certain size constructed after the effective date be constructed so that up to 50% of all spaces are electric vehicle capable. So with that, conduit and raceways for the future installation of an EV charging station, and up to 10% of all spaces be electric vehicle ready. So it has the actual charging station with a minimum level 2 electric vehicle charging. So these EV capable and EV ready requirements will phase in over 5 years, beginning January 1 of 2021 to account for current and future market needs. So this is what the stair step or phase in looks like for both the EV capable and EV ready spaces between 2021 and up to 2041. And so this was the timeline of the ordinance. So it was introduced September 1st. Common Council referred to Sustainable Madison Committee on October 5th. We got the Transportation Policy and Planning Board tonight, and then it'll go to Plan Commission next Monday, and then back to the Common Council on the 17th. It did pass Sustainable Madison Committee with amendment. And with that, I can stop share, and myself and Matt are here to answer any questions.
All right, questions? Alder Furman, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you, Stacey, can you share with us the amendments that came from sustainability?
Yep. So there were two. One was to better define the EV capable versus EV ready. There was some confusion in the current draft ordinance on if it was just the raceways or if it was raceways and conduit. So they just wanted some tightening up of the definition and clarification language throughout the ordinance. And then also there was a public comment that requested the inclusion of electric bicycle charging. However, that being said, after further research, there actually is a separate ordinance where we can address electric bike charging and not directly through this ordinance change.
Thank you.
Eric Sundquist, go ahead.
You said that this applies to commercial and residential uses. I looked in the ordinance. I didn't see where it specified. Is it all commercial and residential, or over a certain size? Maybe I'm missing the application there in the what's attached to Legistar.
Sure, I can take that. So the requirement for the electric vehicle charging station is going to be for, starts with residential uses, typically multifamily residential uses, where they have 6 or more parking spaces. That's the beginning. And then the other requirement is for parking being provided for certain uses where people park vehicles in excess of 6 hours. And that list is narrowed down to colleges, universities or similar, higher learning, hotel, motel, hospital, health clinic, office, parking facility, schools, certain types of schools, and any other uses where typically people park in excess of 6 hours, which will be interesting to interpret.
Okay. So it's not commercial in the sense of we usually use it for retail. It's more for employment and, okay,
Institutional employment, residential.
institutional, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Chris McCahill, go ahead.
Did you call on me? Sorry.
I did. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I had a brief hearing loss moment. My question was about the ramping up of the EV capable spaces. I get it a little bit more with the EV ready spaces, but what's the thought behind the trade-offs between making more spaces capable early on versus having to go back in later?
Well, a lot of this came from back and forth with the alderperson and different representatives of the business community. We've been meeting with them on and off for about a year now to talk about this. Slowed down quite a bit when COVID hit, but we had some face-to-face meetings, and Alder Abbas, lead sponsor on this, was trying to figure out where he was predicting the sweet spot would be on this. It's a little bit of a guessing game. You have to look at trends. You have to look at kind of where electric vehicle sales are going. It's also a little tricky too because Teslas aren't sold in Wisconsin, so we don't know exactly how many are being sold in Wisconsin. Can't tell them here for some reason, but there are quite a bit out there. And so this is basically a sort of a best guess approach at where we would want to be with some policy push towards a fairly substantial number at a certain point in time.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any further questions for staff? All right. Seeing none, I will consider motions. Alder Foster, go ahead.
I would move a recommendation to adopt.
On a motion, is there a second? Eric Sundquist, is that a second? Excellent. Discussion. Alder Foster, do you want to speak to it? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. I asked for the referral to come here really for two reasons. One, I just wanted to make sure that the Transportation Policy and Planning Board was aware of this move. Obviously, there's a very strong transportation component to this. And especially I wanted to just highlight the work around sustainability and transportation policy. So as you know, Stacy showed one of the slides about our sustainable plan, and it's got a whole chapter on transportation. And I think a lot of the work that we do is very much in service of improving sustainability, but I think sometimes we don't talk about it very explicitly. And I think it is something I just want to bring more into our conversations and make sure that we are really thinking about and focusing on the kind of impact to sustainability that our policy decisions are having. And as you saw in the other slide, transportation sector is the #1 contributor to CO2. So I think we've got a real opportunity on the board to really try and tackle that. Number two, so I'm very supportive of this. I think it's a great sort of small move, but also I think it's pretty clear to people in this space that simply moving from fossil fuels to electric at the same levels of vehicle miles traveled is also not going to be a solution for us. That we really, I think some of the things in our wheelhouse in terms of VMT reduction, getting that mode shift, getting fewer people driving, whether they're gas powered or electric powered cars, is really going to be critical in order for us to make the level of change that we need to. So again, supportive of this, but I think we're really in the seat where we need to be thinking even bigger and bolder about how we're going to help get us where we need to be on the sustainability front. The other kind of primary reason that I wanted it to come here is, based on that other recommendation from Sustainable Madison Committee around the e-bikes component. I think it was a really good recognition that they had of kind of the potential and the opportunity to promote and support e-bikes as a component in our transportation system. And as Stacy said, so I actually did reach out to Alder Abbas and a few other folks, including staff, and we really took a look at this and to see, how could we integrate that into here for the recommendation from Sustainable Madison. And as Stacy said, I think realistically, this is very much focused on electric car charging, and it would have been, pushing a square peg through a round hole. That being said, I think everybody agreed that there really is an opportunity to take a look at our zoning code to see what we can do to enhance and support e-bike adoption and support that. And and Matt remembers the bike parking study, downtown bike parking study that was produced a couple of years ago. It's actually on our future agenda item list, and hopefully we can kind of get a review of that in the next several months. But when that was actually presented to the old Ped Bike Motor Vehicle Commission right before it was disbanded. And so we didn't have an opportunity to really do some of the follow-up from that, but there were some really, I think, important and interesting observations about some potential improvements we could make to the zoning code related to bike parking generally. And so I think that the goal right now is to kind of go back into that space and to look at what we can do around bike parking requirements in the zoning code broadly and specific to e-bikes, and really take that on as its own kind of separate initiative. So I just wanted to put that out there and explain why why there wasn't work to integrate that recommendation for e-bike kind of parking into this ordinance. So again, I'm very supportive of this, and encourage everybody to support it as well.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, just a reminder that Margaret, both of you and Badri are both currently in voting status. With that said, all those in favor of amending sections recommending amending sections 28.211, 28.061, 28.072, 28.082, and 28.091, and creating section 28.141(8)E of the Madison General Ordinances to create a new use electric vehicle charging facility, and to require that certain future parking facilities are constructed to include a specified amount of electric vehicle capable and electric vehicle ready spaces. Please unmute yourselves and say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Chair believes it's unanimous. If you'd like to register a no vote, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that is unanimous. We will move on to our next item. Legistar 62843, bus rapid transit branding update.
Yeah, Chairman, if I could give 60-second introduction, just to explain where we are in the BRT process. As we were scoping out project development, we felt it was important that we include an evaluation of different kinds of branding and naming strategies for the service, knowing that BRT is something new. It is a premium service, but at the same time, recognizing that it's part of Metro, so there needs to be some sort of a coordination between the branding and naming schemes of both of those. So we included on our team sub-consultants, Zebra Dog, good to have you here, Amy Byler, Chris Moore, and they will go through some slides that sort of discuss the thinking that goes into a naming type of a program for public transit in particular, and then they've developed a few alternatives for us to think about. And we'll also talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each and how well or how poorly some of these might meet the objectives that we're trying to convey with our image and with branding. So with that, I will turn it over to Zebra Dog. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have the ability to share screen. Looks like you do, so take it away.
Thank you, David. My name is Chris. I'm joined by my colleague Amy, as David noted. We have a few slides to walk you through. And just to segue from what David said, our work has been assisting the efforts to think about and develop the brand for BRT. And eventually will be things like a logo and perhaps in some other pieces. So where that effort has started is thinking about the naming component as and in relation to Metro Transit services that exist. So we'll walk you through some rationale with that, a couple of those alternatives, and a little bit of our thinking throughout the process. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Amy, who I believe has control of the visuals.
I do have control. Thank you. We are excited to share with you our process as we began working with our team here. We're going to take you through our process and eventually share 4 options of what we feel is really supporting the themes and goals of BRT. So first, what we'd like to do is we want to, learn as much as we can. So we do a lot of research. We're understanding, Metro Transit has been updated, so we want to look at all the branding out there, right? And also how the potential new BRT will look. So this is something that we take into consideration. We're reviewing the reporting, the routes, and just the overall vision that has been shared. So when we begin our creative process, we take in consideration all the work that has already happened, and we begin to look at the themes that resonate. So some of them that kind of bubbled up to the top are we want to have a name that is going to be, it represents speed. It wants to communicate that it's fast. We want it to be reliable, inclusive, it's new and exciting. It's going to be servicing the greater Madison area, and it's easy to use. So as we began looking at the goals for the name, we want to make sure that that name reinforces all of those themes. We want it to be something that we can remember, so it's easy to say. It would be great if it could be unique or have some originality. And we obviously want it to support our local community here in Madison. So we took some of those themes and we began breaking it down, trying to come up with different ways that we can communicate some of these ideas. So for speed, we're looking at fast, accelerate, express, quick, rapid. For transit, we have route, forward, connected, passage, line. The Madison region, we're looking at words that like badger, forward, isthmus, four lakes, tradition. And from that, we began putting some of those together. And we came up with a list that we further went through and again, felt stronger about some of these than others. And so next we're going to take each of these and we're going to break it down even further. So our four that we felt the strongest about was Icon, Metro Rapid, DART, and WeGo. So the first one, we're looking at Metro Transit and high-speed service. So those words, how can we take that and create a name? So we're looking at Metro and Rapid, Metro Rapid. When we begin to start thinking about Metro Rapid, some of the positioning lines that could support that would be get there faster with Metro Rapid, moving Madison forward, accelerate today. So again, just looking to make sure that this is resonating with the themes and the goals. So we want to kind of wordsmith and think about different ways that we could support this. We also then wanted to consider as we move forward, there's probably going to be lines. So are we looking at colors as identifying those lines? So we could take Metro Rapid and it could be Rapid Red, Rapid Green, Rapid Blue, and so forth. So we definitely felt like this was supporting that idea. Scheme 2, we're looking at connecting the isthmus. So using that kind of corridor to support the different routes. So as we look at that, we came up with Icon. So Icon Rapid Transit, again, some positioning lines, connecting Madison with the greater Madison area. You can with Icon, commute quicker with Icon, get on with Icon, get there with Icon, and jump on the Icon. So again, just trying to wordsmith to see if this is starting to stick. The lines for Icon could be Icon Red, Icon Green, Icon Blue, etc. Next, we're looking at a name that would really support the community, and of course the transit. So we looked at We Go. So some tagline ideas: where you go, we go. Get on with We Go. So it's a little bit more funny or a little bit more less serious. But we definitely felt like that was something that we wanted to share. Again, the lines, we could be go red, go green, go blue. And the last one, we have a name that's really supporting the Madison area. So the Dane area rapid transit could be DART. Metro DART, taglines: quick, convenient, reliable, a Four Lakes transit solution. Lines could be dark red, dark green, dark blue, etc. So we felt it was important to have a slide that could share all 4 names, and we feel very strong about all of them, and we would open it up for discussion. If there's any questions, we could take them now.
All right, questions? Let me.
There's one public comment.
That's right. Thank you, Anna. I was just thinking about that and then forgot it in the last 30 seconds. Actually, okay, so we do have, let's do that first. Bob Schaefer, 6 Cottonwood Circle, Madison. Mr. Schaefer, if you're ready to go, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, it says I'm still muted.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. Those are all very interesting names and ideas and things like that, but in some ways I kind of think that this is almost putting the cart before the horse. And that I say that because there have been some significant changes to the city and to the BRT system that I'm not sure how much of an increase there is going to be in speed. The speed limits were recently reduced. I'm not sure whether that's been factored into the travel times or not yet. And that one of the other things is moving the BRT to the center of the, I think especially on East Washington Avenue, that I don't think some of the things have been considered in terms of the boarding and disembarking, and the fact that the only time that people are going to be able to get to or from the BRT center things is when the traffic is stopped, which is also going to mean that the BRT buses are stopped. And that, so that the question is with loading of bikes and all the other kind of things like that, are the BRT buses going to be available to start at the same time the rest of the traffic starts? Or is there a potential that they could end up being held to the next traffic signal change? So I think that there's a lot of things that are unanswered in there. One of the things that I've also considered is the current decrease in ridership that Metro is experiencing. I'm not sure that there's been any confirmation that BRT will increase ridership. I think most of the people that are in favor of it are current riders. People that I've talked to are not necessarily thrilled about BRT. So I think that there's a lot of things that have to be discussed. And I know that there's been a lot of work put into the naming conventions. And I think all of those conventions are great if they were to be held to be true. But I think that there's a lot of homework to be done before we can even reach this point. And I think the consideration of the larger buses is also another factor that needs to be looked at, because there's been no definite documentation that the ridership is going to be increased by that. And also in terms of the timing, how much time is it going to take to load bicycles and all the rest of that? So there's a lot of things that are here that I think that need to be looked at first before we can actually really invest the time and the finances or whatever looking into the naming conventions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Questions for staff? Actually, I see Tom's hand up. Let's let Tom, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to convey two thoughts by staff that they must not be here. One consideration was DART. DART is also the name of, I think it's the Dallas, Dallas metro system. So there was some concern that if someone Googles DART on their phone, you know, Madison's DART isn't going to be the first thing up. It might be another system. And some on the staff team weren't as excited about WeGo. I think that was just more personal preference on some of the staff team. But I just wanted to convey those two considerations to the board, and then look forward to guidance and direction from the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. All right, Margaret Bergamini, go ahead.
Thanks for your work on this. It is not an easy job to undertake. And I want to echo some of staff concerns. DART is very heavily associated with Dallas area rapid transit. And actually, all but one of these, I don't use Google, I use a different search engine, but WeGo comes up with many, many different systems, lines, applications, software applications, Metro Rapid. I mean, we have trouble with our Metro branding, and that Metro is used by so many different systems around the United States and really around the world. It might act, I understand wanting to start with sort of a brainstorming and word association, but you also might want to get a list of all the transit systems in the US, and staff can easily give that to you from the FTA to try to see if we can avoid avoid some of those commonly used tropes like Metro Rapid or WeGo. And the other thing that is always difficult is how much are we going to actually want to differentiate the identity of BRT from regular Metro routes, from the campus system. And we also may want to take into consideration, just as we recently did as we were looking at naming and rebranding the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Regional Plan Commission, the extent to which we want to center Madison versus the region, with the hope that this will eventually become a regional system in name, not just in actuality, because it actually is a regional system now. So those are a few of my thoughts. I wish I had something catchy for you. Icon is really the only one that I didn't, within a split second, see a number of associations with other transit systems.
All right, Tom, I assume you have a response. Go ahead. See your hand up. That's why I'm.
Oh no, I should have taken my hand down.
Okay.
I have no response. I'm just listening. So.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Eric Sonnenquist, you're up next.
Sure. I mean, quick response to this for what it's worth. I'm not an expert in branding, but I'm not sure that I thought of Dallas right away too with DART, but then again, I mean, how many people are going to do that? I'm not sure it's that critical. There are only so many good names for bus lines and transit lines around. So my thing is that I would like people to be not confused at all about how to ride it. And to me, having it branded as Metro is an advantage, and it doesn't sound like it's going to take a separate fare card or a separate thinking or anything else, that everything works together So as long as we have Madison Metro, my vote would be just off the top of my head here for simplicity to keep it with that. And I kind of thought like the sort of sub-branding with the word rapid to differentiate it was enough. I do see Margaret's point about trying to nod to the being a region. I think, Metro kind of does that already. It's Madison Metro area, not just Madison. And I mean, in that sense, the Isthmus connection is pretty limiting because it's really pointing to not only Madison, but a small part of Madison. So my 2 cents.
Thanks, Eric. Baltazar, you're up next.
Thank you, and thanks for all this work. I have been involved in some of this work before with other things, and it is a headache. So thanks for all the work with this. So I mean, I think I just, if we can, I think maybe in a number of years there are going to be more folks who speak Spanish, and that it might be easier to. Even like I'm thinking about like Metro Rapid, that's very close to Spanish. You can do many things to welcome, folks who only speak Spanish, Metro Rápido, so you will not have to do many changes. I think I am concerned when we have some of these other words that do not translate easily to the Spanish language or any other language that I might not know. But I think, if we're thinking about welcoming more communities, so I think it will be good to have a name that will easily translate or folks will understand right away, like such a Metro Rapid, we know rapid is rapido. So it will be easier for folks to be like, oh, okay, it goes fast. You don't have to explain many things. So I like that simplicity, just because that's something that can be translated into at least Spanish. I don't know other languages. I do like the idea about, this We Go Metro. The name obviously is very, is very popular. I just Googled it and we have a lot of hits out there with that name. But I like that idea about Metro being our metro, anyway. So yeah, just my comments. I know we're just in this trying to figure things out, but I will recommend if we can move towards acronyms that are very hard are not very welcoming, and maybe just using a simple word that will. And maybe it might not sound very exciting, but it's very welcoming. Anyway, so thank you very much for all your work with this.
Thank you, Baltazar. Alder Foster, you're up next.
Thank you. I think I would echo a couple of things I heard Margaret and Eric mention. My first instinct also is not in direct response to the question here, but more about I hope that we don't overemphasize this as a separate brand. I think it's really, 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 really important that we're focused on Metro as a system. I think sort of thinking about the network redesign work, I'm hopeful that we'll have hopefully other kind of arterial routes that, can maybe even match in terms of frequency, and maybe they're not technically BRT in terms of the long buses, et cetera, but I'm hopeful that we can kind of be flexible in how we're designing that new network to have other fast and frequent service. And I think that, for sort of mass adoption and support, we should be focused on Metro as a system and not as and have this be an integrated part and not a separate brand or system. I think that, and to that end, right now we've been talking about BRT for the last 10 years, but especially the last couple of years, more and more. So either we're going to invest in trying to change how people talk about it, or they're going to still call it BRT regardless of what we put on there. So I would just also, I'm not sure I would commit a lot of resources and time and energy to try and change the branding, to be honest. The DART, I mean, people mentioned Dallas. I'll just say Margaret mentioned when the MPO and the Regional Plan Commission both did the rebranding in the last year, and we talked a lot about this question of like Madison area, et cetera. And I would say both groups ended up really landing on Madison area, and not something like Dane County or something like that. Even for those municipalities that were not Madison and maybe didn't want it to be Madison centric, everybody sort of acknowledged that it's Madison, it's the Madison area, and nobody really thinks about it as Dane County. So, I mean, DART is sort of catchy, but just in terms of Dane area, I don't think that really holds a lot of a catch for people. And then ultimately, I think the thing that's really going to be the most important here is the actual names of the lines. So I don't think anybody's going to say DART or we go blue, red, et cetera. They're just going to say the blue, the red, the green. So I'm assuming that there was some discussion and that like colors is the way to go, but that's probably in some ways the more important branding question in my mind is what are the names of the different lines going to be called? But that's probably what's going to end up being used when people talk about it. So all that said, if I had to pick one of these four, I would probably go with Metro Rapid also just for kind of the reasons that Eric said, but I just wouldn't put a lot of energy into trying to set this up as a separate brand. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Chris McCahill, you're up next.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just going to echo a lot of that. My instinct initially went to Rapid for the same reasons that Eric and Alder Foster touched on mainly, and in thinking about how this would actually be used. So yeah, I also thought no one's going to say the Rapid Red or anything. It'll be the red line or something. And I immediately thought of Boulder, where they brand each line like there's a jump, there's a dash, and other ones like that. I think so. Yeah, that is kind of how I think the branding will come in at the end of the day. Except for in saying like we're going to invest in expanding Rapid service. I think that'll be a useful way of sort of talking about BRT in that sense. So, and it probably not as important that if you Google the specific brand of the BRT line that it's unique or anything. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Margaret, you're up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of what Balthazar said. And he reminded me that he made a very good point and reminded me of a couple of things. I get the unique privilege of trying to explain Metro to 10 or 15,000 new students every semester. So, and doing it across all the many language groups. So I do think it's going to be important to test market this. Metro Rapido works well in Spanish. Let's make sure that there's some kind of easily translated equivalent in Korean, Cantonese, Mandarin, etc. Again, it's easy enough to find out the major language groups at the university. And that's not just for students, that's also for staff and visitors. We have a lot of international folks who come in and who we need to be able to explain succinctly the system to them. And there's a lot to be said for sticking with something that's simple, that allows Metro to economize on its marketing materials and kind of move smoothly they've already done the modernization from Madison Metro to Metro Transit, which helps get us towards a more generic or regional. And they've updated the logo to slightly differentiate it from all the other metros out there in the US. The blue and light blue colors are very commonly how buses come to us. Very common color schemes, and that's fine too. We don't need flashy, we need intelligible, easily intelligible. We need to get over that learning curve, get over that hurdle for people. Frankly, I kind of like the idea of our metro. So, but definitely keep other languages in mind and how it's going to translate.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. Are there any further questions or comments for staff or our presenters? All right. Seeing none. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate your presentation. Thanks to all the members of the board for giving their feedback. Hopefully we gave you, Amy and Chris, what you were looking for feedback. And yeah, we look forward to seeing this again.
Thank you.
All right, last call for questions, comments, or discussion on this item. All right, seeing none, we will move on to our next item. Registar 62818, our 2021 meeting schedule. Let me see if I can pull that up. Sorry, I have it up on a different computer. All right. Sorry, my should have had this pulled up on this here. Okay. Okay, come on. Okay, sorry about the delay there. All right, so it looks we've got, for the most part, generally about 2 meetings a month, which has kind of been our standard for about the last year. I'm not going to go through this right now to see if it works for everyone. We'll send out the typical. I mean, we'll do either a doodle poll or just send out the invites and see how it works for folks. If folks have had a chance to look at this, are there any dates that stand out to anyone, particularly our alders, where you know for sure they're not going to be a good date? So start with that. Right, seeing no hands raised. Okay, Baltazar, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the only one that might be just January 4th. I don't know if that's a big deal for folks. It's 2 days, 3 days after the New Year's. It's not an issue for me, but I would hate to not have enough people coming to that meeting because of the first meeting of the year. But otherwise it's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Anybody else feel like that 3 days after the new year will be too soon? Badri, go ahead.
I just wanted to second Balthazar's thing. Yeah, it's a long weekend, right, after the new year, so it's probably tough.
Okay. I suppose we could look for another date in January. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Just one thing to keep in mind in terms of conflicts with other city meetings. So, Monday meetings are Finance and Plan Commission are kind of the 2 big ones that are also on Mondays. So that will probably limit being able to, shift to one of those because we have, at least some of the alders here have Eric's on Plan Commission and Alder Furman's on, and Alder Kembler are both on Finance. So it just might limit it. We have to look at something other than Monday, I think.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll see if there's an alternate available, but that may be the one that we go with. And at our last December meeting, if folks are really, really adamant that they don't want to have a meeting on January 4th, that can be the board's decision at that time. All right, any further discussion on this for now? All right. then we will move on to our next item. If I can find my, oh, come on.
Tom, before we move on, I just wanted to point out one thing. It took me a second to pull this up. MMSD school resumes on January 4th. So the world is sort of going to resume after holidays on the 4th of January. So I guess, yeah, we certainly can check in and see where people's plans are in December. I imagine a lot of people are traveling. And as I said, the school is resuming on the 4th.
Thank you, Alderforeman. If you party so hard on the 1st that you're still out by the 4th, then you may want to rethink your strategy. All right. So we'll continue with this as our tentative schedule and get invites out for that. All right. Seeing no further discussion on this, we'll move on to Legistar 62819 Vision Zero High Injury Network presentation.
Renee, do you mind if I say about 30 seconds worth?
Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Okay, good. So many, not all, but many Vision Zero cities have a high injury network. And the reason why they do that is it allows them to focus their investments on the streets that are causing the most severe injuries and fatalities. Otherwise, you can end up spreading your resources along lots of streets, but those streets aren't the ones that are resulting in people losing their lives. There's lots of different ways to calculate a high injury network. I think about a year ago, we kind of came up with 50% of our fatalities occur on about, what was it, 2% of our roads? I can't remember, Allie. But Renee, Corey, and Allie have gone through various iterations, and so they'll provide a little bit more background on where we are right now. Thanks for letting me jump in at the beginning of me.
No problem. See, now he stole part of what I was going to say, but thank you for having me. Most of you know I'm Renee Calloway, the public administrator, and I have Allie Heinritz, who is an engineer in our traffic engineering department, who's been sort of co-leading this project with me. And then we also have Corey Stoetinger from traffic engineering, who is here in case you ask super technical questions. I am afraid I'll screw them up and then he will yell at me. So I just have him here for those. But to get started, we talked about the importance of the high injury network. As Tom said, not every single city has one, but it is something that the Vision Zero network strongly recommends. So we wanted to come here tonight to talk about it. As you'll see, there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of approach this. There's not one sort of secret answer that all the best cities are using. They really sort of consider their own context and make decisions as to what they think is going to lead to the desirable outcomes of eliminating fatal and serious crashes. And this is really just a starting point. I know you're probably all eager for even more data and charts and things like that, but we're really starting with this, and then we will dig into that. We know that we need to better understand these crashes. We need to understand why they're happening, who they're happening to, and we need to understand where they're happening. And that really is important from an equity perspective. What are the demographics of the neighborhoods? What are the demographics of the people involved? And so we do want to get to that, but we wanted to start here with sort of this cornerstone item, which is the high injury network. So I'm just going to go pretty quickly through a few so you kind of get a feel for what cities are doing. And I included a couple of large cities, but I do think that they need to do things a little bit differently because they have such a high number of crashes, and they also have a much larger street network than we do. But I think there are things that you can learn from that. And for instance, here's Boston. And one of the things that we will talk about is this idea of looking at pedestrians, bicycles, and motor vehicles to ensure that you're really capturing all of those in your high injury network. So in Boston, it's a much larger city, but they looked at the top 3% for each mode to combine those into one network, and then also looking at the intersections. But as you can see at this map, they ended up with about 60 miles of streets, down to a much more manageable level than they might have had otherwise. Austin, I picked that. People like to say Madison and Austin are kind of alike, but Austin obviously is a much larger city. And they also look at bicycles, pedestrians, as well as motorcycles for more moderate, severe, and fatal injuries. Whereas for the motor vehicles outside of just for cars, trucks, things like that, they're just looking at the fatal and serious. And then they combine those together to get a high injury network, which then is about 8% of their streets as well. Ann Arbor kind of has a tiered approach. They realized in looking at their high injury network that even just looking at fatal and serious crashes, that they could, on just 7 streets, capture 37% of the sort of high injury network, which they made their tier 1. And then 23 streets were the next 40%. They tried to say, okay, like we're really going to focus on the streets that are the worst, the intersections that are the worst, and take that as an approach. Columbus, they too tried to look at people walking and biking to get a little bit more of those injuries into their network, wanting to make sure those were well reflected, and then just fatal and serious injury crashes for motor vehicles. And then they sort of have a tiered approach in that, you know, they had sort of a more bright red color, as you can see, for the segments of their high injury network that they saw as being the worst of those high injury network streets. In Eugene, you know, once again, for motor vehicles, they took those serious and fatal crashes and made a high injury network. Then they did the same, looking at even including less serious injuries for walking and biking, made separate maps for those, and just combined them all into one map to make up their high. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Allie to go through a few of the things that were in the handouts that were online.
Yeah, so I'm going to break down some of the items that helped us put up, so a lot of the items to make the high injury network. So to break it down, what is the KABCO injury severity scale? This scale is a way to report injury severity at the scene of a crash. We use these kinds of like lettering to tell if they're fatal, which is K. A is suspected serious injuries. B is minor injuries. C is possible injury. And O is no apparent injury. This is the chart for network crash information. So this is showing our 5-year total for K, which is serious injuries, or no, fatal fatalities. And then A, which is serious injuries. B is minor injuries. C is possible. And O is no apparent injuries. So as you can see, for 5-year total, motor vehicle crashes that were fatal were 15, bicycle were 2, pedestrians were 13. 5-year total for serious injuries was 223 for motor vehicles, bicycles were 34, pedestrians were 84. As for minor injuries for the 5-year total, motor vehicles were 1,857, bicycles were 286, pedestrians were 217, and so on. So I don't have to tell you every number. And then on the bottom, we have 5-year average total for fatal, serious, minor, and possible, and no apparent injuries.
And we kind of included these because it kind of helps get your mind around what we're talking about if you can actually see these totals versus just, you know, guessing at what it might be.
Selecting crash severity for the high injury network. We are possibly looking and weighting different crashes, like we might weight pedestrians and bicycle crashes at higher, just because there are kind of more important and there's sometimes fewer than vehicle crashes. So the goal is to eliminate fatal and serious injuries, and that's a goal for Vision 0. Sometimes B or even C and O injuries, which are C is possible and then the O is no apparent injury, particularly for crashes involving walking and bicycles. Walking and biking crashes may be small sample size, if only included in fatalities. Injury severity may be miscoded, and then many minor injuries in any area may still indicate a problem. So options to consider is making a high injury network with only K and A crashes only. Another option is to include B for all modes. Or another option is include B for pedestrian bicycle crashes. And another option is include any crash for ped and bike. So weighting crash data can emphasize or de-emphasize modes or severity of crashes, mitigate difference between modes, crash volume, may be less important in cities with smaller road networks and fewer crashes. Some cities also have a tier 1 and tier 2 system, which I'll kind of show you in the slides to come in the maps. Options include fatal and serious crashes weighted equally, all modes weighted equally, weighted of 3 for all mode K and A, which is fatal and serious crashes, and 1 for bicycle and pedestrian D. Kind of getting cut off. That one got cut off. But
I can jump in. So you could just, include just B crashes, or some cities do just include a crash no matter the severity if they think there was an injury or
not. K and A crashes only, so which is severe and fatal. Bicycle and pedestrian crashes weighted at 3. And then what was the last part that got cut off too for some reason, Renee?
And sometimes they might weight the bike and pedestrian crashes more if they feel like there just aren't enough of them, and then motorist crashes that are severe and fatal would just be weighted at a 1 or a less weight, but even those out. And then just a few cities, as I mentioned, might consider motorcycles or mopeds the same as bicycles. And then just different ways to do tier 1 and tier 2, looking at severity or volumes of crashes, just to try to get at that type of a concept.
So this is the example of the high injury network. We're going to give you 2 examples that Corey put together. This is a little blow up of it, so I'll give you a closer look. We're including so the red is the high injury network with the roadways, and then the blue is So the red is just.
Sorry, I skipped ahead accidentally there.
Okay, I was like, wait, I'm confused. So the red is just the fatal and serious injuries, showing you the roadways with the most or the highest fatal and serious injuries. And then the blue that Renee skipped to is including the minor or possible injuries. So it gives you a different look at the high injury network to see if we want to include the minor injuries as well. But the red circles are the fatal crashes.
Oh, sorry.
And then the green is green is the serious injuries. And then all the X's are the bike and the pedestrian crashes. So it kind of gives you a taste of how many crashes there actually are. But the lines are what the network will actually be.
And then this tries to get at kind of explaining those maps a little bit. So if you just take the version 1, it's just looking at fatal and serious crashes. It has, you're going to end up with 43 of the 881 City of Madison streets high injury network. So that's around 4.8% of our streets. And then you can see that if the high injury network is that way, 16 of the 30 fatal crashes are, 50% of them are in there, and so on. And if you do more of the tiered approach, then you see that you're going to end up with a large percentage of those streets when you have a tier 1 and tier 2, and going to capture more of the serious and fatal crashes in there. And I don't know, Corey, if you may want to add anything on that particular piece of the presentation.
I might make a comment. So I guess if you're good to the one on the left, it's I like round numbers. And if you were to actually add up all those, you can basically say about 50% of our crashes occur on about 5% of our roadways, and so that's something. If you go to the tiered approach, it's a little bit more almost 80. One might say almost, no, actually closer to 70, right? 70% occur on about 9% of our roadways. One thing, it's kind of a balancing act. Yang, I guess you want your high injury network small enough so that the monies that you invest really have an effect, right? But then you maybe don't want to artificially keep the high injury network small, because then it makes perhaps other safety needs off of the high injury network not eligible for the Vision Zero funding, or so it's just some considerations.
I'm going to go back. This is just a blow up of, what the right-hand side would look like under the tiered system. So obviously the blue adds in a fair amount. And the red would be if we were just following what's on the left-hand side, or just a very laser focus on those big. And that is our presentation, and we are ready for questions and whatnot, discussion.
Sounds good. We have one registrant for public comment. Bob Schaefer, 6 Cottonwood Circle. Bob, if you're still with us and you're ready to go.
I am. Am I unmuted now?
You are. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
A little bit confusing for me here in the reporting of that. The questions, I guess, that I would have is there a differentiation between automobile and automobile, automobile and bicycle, automobile and pedestrian, bicycle and pedestrian, bicycle and bicycle? Are those categorized separately? And that I guess some of the thing would be how is the accident occurred? Is incurred, I should say. What I've seen in some cases are bicycle operators that will run through a red light, or pedestrians that may step out into traffic where they're not supposed to step out in traffic. So I think that when we're looking at these accidents, I think that one of the important things is also to look at what the interaction is and where the fault might lie, so that we can know what types of corrections are needed. If most of the attention seems to be given toward the automobile created accidents, and that so it's important that we look at other factors that come into play in terms of being able to identify the causes of the accidents, and otherwise we can't really work on doing something to remedy them. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Are there questions for staff? Eric Sundquist, go ahead.
First, quick comment that maybe most people are already on board with, but just responding to the previous speaker, the word accidents should be stricken from this conversation. Some, their crashes, whether they were accidental or negligence-based or whatever the cause was, accident is skewing things in one direction. And staff did this. This wasn't anything against staff, just for whoever might be listening. The question is, when you map things, there was a red dot at, I think it was the corner of, in the inset that you showed, Whitney Way and Mineral Point, or at least some north-south and Mineral Point. And the crash was at that intersection, and the north-south road was colored in red for the high priority network, but the east-west Mineral Point was not. So and also that you have to so there's some art to mapping this out, right? It's not just connecting the dots.
Sure, and I'm really going to hand that to Corey because he's the one that works with the different polygons in ArcGIS to do that. So, Corey.
All right. Yeah, that crash in particular happened on, I believe it was the west leg of that intersection. The way we accumulate our crash data and quantify our crash data is by use of polygons, as Renee just said. So those polygons are intersection-based or mid-block based. That particular crash, if I remember correctly, happened just outside the intersection of, I guess, outside the Mineral Point Whitney Way intersection, which you're correct on. It is an art. The way that those were kind of accumulated, as it pertains to the high injury network, was looking for those dots, those hot points, not to, not put any, I guess, precedence or, any, I guess, not to shove that fatality under the rug. It was included in our data analysis. It just did not lend itself to connect the high injury network down that west leg. So yeah, you are correct. It is an art, and it's an art and a science kind of mixed together. So this is our first draft looking at the high injury network. There are other factors we're gonna kind of dig deeper into, but yeah, you are correct. That's, I guess, my 2 cents on how that was accumulated and how we put that together.
So that's fair. I think that's, that's gonna be part of this whole thing. So I only have one other comment, and that is that when I first heard about this, fortunately, there aren't that many fatalities every year in Madison. So the sample size is low. When you get to the serious injuries, there seem to be a lot more, and maybe the sample size isn't an issue, but it might be useful to, just for a sensitivity analysis, to run this for a couple different periods and see how much consistency you get, whether it's moving around a lot. I don't know how many years of data you have and how much effort it would take to do a couple different 5-year periods, or just year to year, and see how it moves around. That might, that you may be able to just verify that the 5-year window gives you a really good solid look at it, or if 2010 to 2015 gives you one thing and 2015 to 2020 looks completely different, then you might know that you have an issue.
Thanks, Eric. Alder Foster, you're up next.
Thank you, and thank you, staff, for work on it. It's really exciting to see progress being made on this initiative, and this is obviously an important step in that direction. I think just in terms of feedback, and to get at kind of what Tom had raised about the trade-offs between sort of narrower, wider focus and eligibility for use of kind of Vision Zero funds. I think I don't have sort of strong feelings on the 1-tier versus the 2-tier, other than I would say I think we should use, whether I think we should use a focus on the injury network to definitely drive a big chunk of our efforts, but also I would hope that as we identify opportunities to improve things, that we should feel comfortable to look at the data itself and whether or not a certain segment is on the high injury network or not. If we know that it has a crash history, I think we should feel comfortable using that in our thinking and our prioritization, and use Vision Zero funds, as those opportunities come up. And I think what I'm thinking about is the work of the traffic calming subcommittee and where kind of the direction that has been heading, and that using safety as an important lens in determining where some of those kind of smaller projects go. And I think I would love to use the full map, again, sort of regardless of whether a segment is on the high injury network or not, that if we're getting requests for speeding, et cetera, and we look at the map and see a number of crashes in that area, I think that should be a significant factor in how we're prioritizing that work. So looks like, Tom, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a balance. I think I remember correctly, Minneapolis put in a provision that for 3 years, all the Vision Zero monies had to be used on the high injury network. I'll tell you what the fear is at the bottom of my stomach. We have a lot of active neighborhoods that all want something, and that I could see the money. Now, first, I'm just going to qualify it. I'm not a policymaker, and you guys are. So I want to qualify. I just fear that this could end up being another traffic calming fund source that doesn't really tackle the tough injury problems in our city. It's and somewhat like I think one of the top injury intersections, if I remember correctly, is Mineral Point and Gammon. You know what I mean? And so that one, there's no neighborhood that's going to cry for that one. They're not going to really, but it's, people are getting hurt at that intersection. So I was just hoping that, the high injury network could provide focus to these funds, recognizing that there are other funds that are available for some of the neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I support that. Right now, I think in our thinking, we've got 500,000 for Vision Zero funds. I have no zero concern saying 500,000. All 500,000 should go towards our high end network, and at least for the first several years. I mean, we'll have no shortage of work to do on that. I think my thinking is on the other side. We've got somewhere around 800,000 in terms of the neighborhood traffic management program, the ped bike enhancements, et cetera. And I actually want to make sure that those funds are also being used in a way that is addressing safety. So it's more, it's not taking Vision Zero funds and putting up traffic calming projects that aren't going to improve safety, but rather putting that same lens on the traffic calming stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Just look at some of the requests in the district, and there are some that have zero crash history. I would say maybe those shouldn't be a priority for traffic calming, and other ones that do. And I think that could be, I think make sure that we have access to this data and that we use this data decision-making process, even if things aren't on the high injury network. So I think we're on the same page with that. And my last comment was just going to be in terms of the ped bike weighting. I think it was like option B, or I can't remember now, but the one that weights all of the fatalities and serious ones kind of equally, but then does include like 1 point for the bike. That one I think made sense to me. And part of the rationale for that is because, one, just obviously there's not a lot of wiggle room when you have a pedestrian or a bicycle crash. There's not a lot of protection to keep, light injuries from becoming very serious. And also, just acknowledging the underreporting of those well because of some issues with the current system. So I thought that would be a good balance, is give everything equal weight if they're serious or fatal regardless of mode, but then include the lower weighting for the ped bike minor injury one. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Foster. Renee, looks like you've got something. Go ahead.
I was just going to add quickly, obviously with the high injury network, we're really talking about like reactive projects, but there also will be a component to this where we really understand those projects better. And Vision Zero would have sort of proactive types of projects where we try to avoid something getting onto the high injury network.
Thank you, Renee. Chris McCahill, you're up next.
Thanks. Kind of to that last discussion, I was wondering about how this would apply in making sure that Vision Zero money is going towards the best investments, and how that relates to the units of analysis here. So it sounds like there's like the polygons are split into intersections and mid-block. So would that let us, this could be used in such a way that we look at an entire corridor and say it's a very high crash corridor, so that's a good investment. But on the flip side, there's like an intersection that's like a huge problem, and just fixing that intersection could be worth, possibly less expensive. And so how does that play out in the way that these numbers are attached to the network?
I can add one thing. So right now, there's this effort with a high injury network and how we want to allocate those investments. And you've already kind of seen some of the advanced Vision Zero that's been occurring this fall, but we've also enlisted the services of a consultant to do HSIP, which is Highway Safety Improvement Program application funds. And so those are more intersection focused. And oftentimes those intersections can be more expensive. And there's a fair amount of federal money that's just for safety. It's kind of a hassle to apply for it. And then once you get it, you have to do some paperwork, environmental reports. But it's oftentimes it's undersubscribed. And so we have a consultant, Taddy, right now that's already put in one application that looks promising, and then I think we'll be having some more applications submitted that you can apply for them twice a year. And I think we have a couple of it will be applied for in January. Renee or Ali, either of you can add to that if you want. So.
I think that's good, unless Chris, you have something else related to that.
What was that?
I mean, obviously, the funds that we have are definitely on the smaller side. So we definitely want to use that high injury network to look at what we can do. But then, as Tom was saying, apply for these larger safety projects to be able to get those, where it may change an entire intersection and we may not have the funds right now in that Vision Zero pot. So, you do have to sort of look for opportunities and for other construction projects as well that can address some of these to help inform, capital improvement projects.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Robert, go ahead.
Thank you. I will second Alder Foster's thought that the weighting that kind of grabbed my attention the most was kind of an equal weighting for the K's and the A's, and then but something to kind of boost up those bicycle or pedestrian injuries as well, to make sure they're not lost in the noise, so to speak. But one of the things I guess I would throw out as a caution, and this probably makes more work for Corey, is sometimes you don't know what the most effective way to look at the data is until you do it 5 or 6 or 10 different ways. And then all of a sudden something jumps out like, whoa, I didn't expect to see that. But when we run when we'd run this process with this weighting, all of a sudden you see something that you weren't seeing at all. And so I would say it's great for policy makers to say, well, I think K and A at a level weight, and then maybe a little bump up for the ped bike stuff is a good way to look at it. And I still think that's probably true. I would certainly ask that you do kind of try a few different weighting strategies, as it looks like you've done, to see if anything is indicative of a problem that we didn't even know we had. And then Eric had made a comment as well about looking at this from a time-based standpoint. And I think at the early stages, it's probably less effective, but certainly if you've been doing this for a few years, it's always good to maybe kind of have like a rolling 5-year period where, 5 years from now, you can say, well, what was our problems in this time frame, and see how that's changing over time. So I think that's a really valid point that Eric had made about looking at things time-based as well. Although my thought is that that's a little less useful when you're just starting out the process and don't have a lot of history to look back on anyway. So I guess to summarize, I liked Alder Foster's weighting proposal. And I would just say, make sure you look at a few other different proposals or scenarios as well, just to see if there's something new that we would learn because we're not asking the right questions right now. See where it takes us. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Any further questions for staff, comments? All right, thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. I think this is something we'll be keeping our eye on as things continue. All right, if there's nothing further for that item, we'll move on to the next one, Legistar 62820, Transit Demand Management Update of Meetings Week of 10/26.
Maybe I'll give an update on we had a meeting with developers on Tuesday, and then there were several people at the meeting on Thursday. We had a kind of a stakeholder meeting with the development community, kind of explaining why we were thinking of doing this, to provide a kind of a transparent and predictable process, kind of eliminate confusion or kind of the delays that are associated in the process. And I'm going to say at the Tuesday meeting, the developers, I think, were more receptive than you might think. I think that they, if they had a very systematic and transparent process, they would just know how to address their development. They had choices in their development, and then they would just submit it. I think right now the process feels unpredictable for them, and so they have a hard time with that. They did make some good comments. I think that staff will have to address. One of the comments is peripheral development. It's hard for the peripheral development to get points because there's typically not transit out there, and oftentimes there may not be bike infrastructure out there, and they might be the first in their neighborhood. So, so we have to think of, well, what could be measures that are effective for them? Some mentioned, well, if we stay in Madison and we're in the peripheral area, then we have all these points that we have to do, and we could just move maybe a quarter mile to the west or a half mile to the west, and then we don't have any of these requirements. So I think we want to keep them in Madison because I believe that Madison's sustainable. We're going to be able to serve Madison better, the more compact our growth pattern is. So that was a good comment. And there are a couple of other comments that we'll, as a staff team, probably discuss tomorrow. But I'd say overall, The meeting on Tuesday was a positive meeting, and I think there was some receptivity to the TDM concept by those who are investing in our community. We also had the workshop on Thursday, and perhaps Alder Foster was there. Board member Eric Sunquist was there. I don't know if Chris, if you were at the thing on Thursday or not. Alder Furman was there, I believe. Nope. Okay, my memory is not very good, but perhaps Alder Foster, how do you feel like it went on Thursday?
I think on the TDM discussion, there was a lot of enthusiasm, interest, kind of positive reaction, and support to move forward with developing a kind of concrete proposal for consideration. I don't know if we wanted to just keep it on TDM, but there was probably more conversation on the parking items.
Yeah, I think initially the discussion on the parking, there was quite a bit of discussion on the details of the parking program, RP3 versus RPO. And then perhaps a little bit later in the discussion, there was maybe 3 steps back saying, well, what is the purpose of our on-street parking program? And, rather than zooming to the detail of switching from RP3 to RPO, should we take 3 steps back and just say, because currently the RP3 program is focused on commuter traffic, and is that the continued purpose and focus we want? So I think there were some good comments. Actually, Alder Foster made some of those more policy-oriented comments, and so that's something that we can work on as a TPBB. As we're as a lot of the decisions are being made or have been made towards the bus rapid transit, that frees up some bandwidth where we could perhaps move and at a higher level discuss what our on-street parking policy should be.
Maybe just add on that last one if I can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think where it was sort of left was it had to have a very brief conversation about kind of who would be lead on which of these sort of shared policy initiatives. And so I think there was kind of broad agreement there that both the TDM and the parking policy really are items that TPPB needs to take the lead on, but there's very sort of keen interest and importance for Plan Commission to be able to weigh in and to get those things approved. And then I think Plan Commission would be taking the lead on transit-oriented development, which we didn't really get to in that discussion on Thursday. But so as Tom said, I think we're well on the way with the TDM, and so I think probably the challenge for us is to really focus in the upcoming months on making some headway on the parking policy side of things, and in particular the interface with TDM and what potential policies or changes in practices we might need to consider to be able to support implementation of the TDM measures.
Great. Thanks, Alder Foster. Thanks, Tom. Are there any questions? All right, we do have one registrant, actually. Bob Schaefer, if you're still with us.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I wasn't quite sure where this was going to go. So I just wanted to be on the roster in case there was something that I felt that I could contribute, but I don't have anything more to say on this.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schaefer. All right, if there are no further questions or discussion for that item, moving on to general announcements. I guess the only thing I have is we'll see everyone next week, or not next week, in 2 weeks on the 16th. we're going to continue to follow some of these things like TDM Vision Zero on a more regular basis. So, look for short updates on many of those things at most of our meetings going forward. I don't have anything else for general announcements, so if no one else has anything, we'll move on to the last item, which is future agenda items. All right, let me pull this up here. I tentatively have for the 16th, complete and Green Street's work plan review, Madison Department of Transportation climate efforts discussion, vehicle miles traveled review. I'll be getting in touch with Bill from MPO and see if we can get some information from him on that. I think they have some data they can share with us. Other than that, there'll be sort of the typical things that come up. Nothing else major on my radar. So Tom, anything else that you want to throw in?
I did talk with Bill. I think he is able to do it.
Okay.
And we'll be confirming with Tool that they'll be able to come. I think November 4th is our first kickoff meeting with Tool, so we'll confirm with them that they're able to attend on the 16th. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. All right. Any comments, questions, or discussion? If there's nothing, then that's all we have for the evening. Pleasantly brief, under 2 hours. I'd entertain motions to adjourn. Looks like a motion by Robert, second. Second, I think Chris got you. So discussion, seeing none, all those in favor of adjournment say aye.
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 Opposed, no. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.